Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is Öztürk, and on behalf of the Dicle Learning Network team, I would like to welcome you all to our third webinar session today. So we are really excited to be with you tonight. And before we start, I would like to hand over to Roger Cohen, who is with us tonight and who is our big supporter. And hope you can hear me, Roger.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Yes, so we will be really happy to hear the latest updates from you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me for this outstanding webinar series. My name is Roger Cohen. I'm the Regional English Language Officer at the Regional English Language Office at the U.S. Embassy in Turkey. And for over 2 decades, our office has worked with host institutions and individuals all throughout this great country to do outstanding projects like this one that promote English language teaching and learning. And this is one of our favorite projects that we're doing right now. It attracts so many great speakers like the ones we have this evening. And we get to interact with many outstanding participants like you all. And just a little bit about the Regional English Language Office. We do all sorts of programs for university teachers and K through 12 institutions. And we support teacher associations throughout Turkey. And we really do a very wide variety of projects and courses, and everything we do is free. So we would love to have you participate in the different programs that we offer. And after the webinar this evening, we'll be sending all of you a newsletter with all of our updates on our online virtual courses that we offer and upcoming programs and projects that the embassy has planned. So I'd like to say welcome to everyone. I would like to say thank you so much to Özge Hocam and Dr. Osman Solmaz for his outstanding leadership in this great program. And I'm really looking forward to this presentation tonight. It's a really interesting topic. And thank you so much. And I hope to be in touch with all of you. My email is on the screen there, I think, if I can see it through the chat box. Yes, it is. Feel free to email me at reloadturkey@state.gov. That's reloadturkey@state.gov. And we'll be in touch with all of you. Thank you so much. Back to you, Özge Hocam.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the pleasure is ours to have you with us. So now I will hand over to Dr. Solmaz for his opening remarks, and then we will start the webinar.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. I am really excited to have you here. And I see a really nice crowd, and I see a lot of comments going on already on the chat box. And I would like to, first of all, thank Roger Cohen and his team at Reload Turkey for sponsoring and supporting us in this project and making this happen. It's a major contribution to ELT community in Turkey and also beyond Turkey. So we appreciate that. I'd also like to thank today's distinguished speakers, David and Dr. Tuncer. It's really a pleasure to have you, and we are looking forward to hearing what you have for us today. And if you have any questions or comments about future projects and webinars, please share with us. And you can visit and follow our webpage, and our assistants will be sharing it with you. And we also have a Instagram page where you can follow us and be updated. And we will be looking forward to continuing this webinar series in the upcoming months. And I would like to hand this over to Özge Hocam for now, and hope to see you in the chat. Thank you, everyone.
Great, then we are almost ready to start. Yes, so I can see a lot of nice comments on the chat box, and feel free to write any comments during the webinar sessions. And if you want to know more about the VIP Learning Network project, please feel free to follow our website and social media accounts. Now, I would like to introduce our first speaker today, David Reed. And before we start, I want to read his bio. So, David Reed graduated from the University of Sussex in 1993. In addition, he has been a holder of CELTA since 1993. What's more, he has worked in EFL, BAT for over 25 years as a teacher, director of studies, teacher trainer. He is now the Director of Technology Enhanced Learning at the English Language Teaching Center, University of Sheffield. His current interests are instructional design and virtual reality for language learning. So we are very much looking forward to your talk, David.
Thank you. Let me just quickly set up my screen. Okay, 1 second. Okay, can I just check? Can people see that? Can people see the screen?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, and can everyone hear me? Am I clear in the chat? Is that okay for everyone? Are you able to hear me clearly? Yes, that's great. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you so much to the VOP Learning Network for inviting me to this presentation, this opportunity to talk about some small sort of action research I've been doing on the subject of virtual reality. It really is a pleasure to be here. As Özge said, my name's David Reed and I work at the English Language Teaching Center at the University of Sheffield. And my talk today is on teaching English in virtual reality. And the subtitle is Reclaiming a Sense of Place, because I think one of the great advantages for virtual reality is that it allows us perhaps to get back that idea of being in one place that face-to-face teaching provides us. Obviously, the last couple of years, we've been affected by COVID and lockdowns, and that meant we've been teaching online with Zoom and Microsoft Teams and various other tools. But often we lose that sense of being in one place with other people. And I think VR can help us teach online, but also bring back that sense of place as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but also I'm just going to talk more generally about teaching in VR and focus on a specific course that we ran for students in VR as well. So just to give you a brief sort of overview, I'll talk a little bit at the beginning about the current state of VR. It's quite an unusual topic, virtual reality. So to give a little bit of sort of background might be useful for people. I'll talk about why this notion of place is important in language learning. I'll also talk a little bit about what the current language learning research tells us about the use of VR. And then I'll talk in a bit more detail about a course that I delivered in VR for a group of Japanese students and what the purpose of the course was, and I'll show some examples from it as well. And from that, I'll talk about what we learned about teaching and learning in VR and what are some of the opportunities and challenges they can offer us for the future. Okay, feel free to pop questions into the chat box. I may not see them all, but some of them I might be able to pick up either later or while we're talking, okay? All right, just to give a brief overview about the current state of VR, because not everyone is familiar with it. Can I just ask, and you can just say yes or no, or a few phrases in the chat box. How many people here have ever used any kind of virtual reality, any kind of sort of headset you put on to view things or experience things in VR? Has anyone ever tried this before? Okay, we're getting a few people who have. Not as a teacher, can be just as you know, a normal person. Teachers are normal people, of course. Okay, so we've got a few people who have. Most people perhaps have not had a chance to use it. Some people have used it for gaming and things like that. That's fairly common. Okay, yeah, lots of people would like to try. So just a sort of a brief overview. I mean, virtual reality has been around for many years, but there's only really been what we call commercial VR from about sort of 8 or 9 years ago. And by commercial, I mean able for people to buy in the shops and to use for personal use. And the sort of the early examples of virtual reality were things like Google Cardboard, and these were these headsets where you put your mobile phone into it and you're able to experience a few things by looking at it through the cardboard. Okay, and these were very sort of widely available, very cheap, very easy to try. They were obviously wireless, so you could, you know, stick your phone in and go anywhere to look at this. However, they were quite limited in what you could do with them. There was quite limited immersion. You could only really sort of use them occasionally, and they were mainly for things like pictures and videos, but it wasn't very immersive. You didn't really feel like you were really in a place. In about 2016, we began to see more expensive headsets arrive. There are some from a company called HTC, called the HTC Vive and the Valve Index and the Oculus Rift. These were very expensive. We're looking probably at several $1,000s, because you not only had to buy the headsets, you also needed quite a powerful computer to use. You needed quite a lot of space to use them. You can see there, the man there in that picture, he's got this quite large area he needs to operate in, and he had to have these kind of sort of little tripods with little cameras to map the space that he's in. It wasn't wireless. It was quite cumbersome and difficult to use. You had wires everywhere connected to the controllers and the headsets. But it was incredibly immersive, mainly because the images in the headset were coming from the computer. So you could have these incredible, you know, immersive experiences where you could go to places or participate in different games and different sort of experiences of concerts and you know, activities, and you really did feel like you were there. But obviously the price was very, very, very difficult for people to be able to use. And so for educational purposes, it was probably never going to reach wider adoption. However, in the last few years, we're beginning to see these devices which kind of blend the better elements of both those kinds of devices. You can see an example of one here. They particularly come from a company called Oculus, and they released one called the Oculus Quest in 2019 and one called the Oculus Quest 2 in 2020. And you know, they're not cheap, but they're certainly not as expensive as the high-end devices back from 2016. You know, these are a bit more affordable, around $300 or £300 it is in the UK. They're wireless, so you're not tethered or connected to any other device. You can kind of take them anywhere and use them anywhere. They're quite light, quite easy to use. You've got quite decent immersion with these devices, and you can take part in games, and you can take part in lots of different experiences. They're essentially kind of quite a powerful mobile phone on your face, and these have sold incredibly well in the last couple of years, and maybe lockdown helped with that, but millions of people have bought these, and you know, there is a wide number of people across many different countries who use these to participate in various activities and games. And you can see sort of the kinds of things people do with these devices now. You know, simple things like playing table tennis. They can take part in conferences. There's lots of these kind of social apps where you can talk to people and participate in lectures and conferences and courses. You can go to the cinema. You can sit in the cinema as if you're really there. And again, maybe in COVID times, that was very useful to be able to do that. We all miss the cinema, and being able to sit as if you were sat in this huge cinema was possible in virtual reality. You could go fishing. People could follow their hobbies in VR and represent fishing in a way that seemed quite realistic. Fitness was a really big thing. Again, people couldn't exercise during COVID, so it became very popular to participate in different sort of boxing activities and physical exertion using virtual reality. And quite creative things you could do as well using these apps. This is an example of, for example, painting, where people were painting in VR. You can just see, let me just bring this up. Sorry, 1 second. You can see an example here. I'll perhaps turn down the music on this a little bit. you can see some examples of what VR kind of looks like from the user's perspective here. I'll just mute that while it's playing. So you can see some of these apps that are being played. Here is the kind of exercise apps that people sort of frequently participate in. I think this doesn't really convey exactly what the feeling is like, because obviously in VR, you can turn completely around and see everything around you. But this does give a feeling for what it kind of looks like when someone's actually inside the VR headset. You can see this example of sort of table tennis. This is one of the sort of creative apps. This is sculpting. So people can sort of sculpt and create pictures in 3 dimensions. And again, it's great for kids and young adults to participate in this. Okay. And obviously, there have been attempts also to put language learning into VR as well. Just as you get language learning apps on your mobile phones, they've started to emerge on mobile devices as well. One example is something, for example, called Mondly. People may have seen or heard of this before. And again, this is something you can participate in VR. You put on the headset, you can sort of interact with people. These are not real people. These are computer generated characters, and you can practice the language in different sort of touristy based situations like cafes and trains and train stations and those kinds of things. They're quite limited though, and I would say that the appeal of these runs out quite quickly. They are quite similar to some of these mobile apps, like things like Duolingo. Okay. And just to see someone's question, I'm not promoting any company. I work at a university. Okay, and so it's very much for self-study, but you don't really get that sense of interacting with people and being part of a sort of a group of people that are working together. And there have been attempts to promote language learning inside some other apps as well, certain like social apps. And there are many social apps in VR where you can meet other people and talk to them in different locations. And people have tried to do language learning in these. You can see an example there. There's an app called VR Chat, and people have tried to do sort of Chinese lessons there. You can see an example of one. Another one is Rec Room. You can see another example there of people participating in virtual reality in a Chinese lesson. Another one is Alt Space, and here you can see an English lesson taking place there. Again, interesting, and there has been research done into these. However, these apps are not really designed for language learning, so require quite a lot of technical knowledge on the part of the teacher to be able to run the lesson, and also quite a lot of technical knowledge from the students to be able to participate in them, which means there's quite a barrier to VR. It's not like just walking into a school or going on to Zoom. There's a lot of technical expertise needed to be able to do that. However, I think I became a bit more interested in virtual reality when I got to know people who had released an app called Immerse. Okay, and I'm not connected to Immerse in any way. I've used their software, but I'm not promoting it at all. But I was interested in this because this is software which allows students to participate in live classes. And you can see they use the headset and they're there in the live class, and they can interact with both the teacher and the student. The other students are wearing the headsets. And the teacher is not wearing a headset, but the teacher is in front of the computer, and the teacher is interacting in the same virtual space though, but using the computer, and they have a slightly different screen where they can use different buttons on the screen to move around the screen, change the location, to bring up different items, whiteboards. So it's very well designed for teachers who don't need to be technically minded to be able to engage with students in virtual reality. And down the left of the screen, you can see there's all these different buttons that allow you to do things like wave your hands and gesture to the students, or also place items within the location. Now, we were very interested to learn and use this software and to see how students reacted to having lessons in VR. And I think we had certain questions we wanted answered. And some of the questions we really wanted answered was this first one: does VR help create a better sense of place than online learning? We're interested to see whether learning in VR encourages students to speak more freely. Often students can feel quite anxious and nervous to speak a foreign language in class or even online in Zoom. Does being in VR change that? So is it the fact that they're behind a kind of an avatar change how they feel and how they express themselves? And connected to that, do they have a reduction in their own anxiety and nerves because they're communicating via an avatar? We also wondered whether VR helped people to remember vocabulary and language better. Does situating the lessons in a particular place help create those memory connections that help them to remember vocabulary items? And also possibly, does VR help them concentrate better than online or face-to-face classes? Now, before I explain a little bit about the research, it's worth mentioning why I think this idea of place is important. And there's quite a lot of research as to why the notion of place is important, both in language learning and in online learning. Certainly in online learning, the concept of place, particularly when studying online, is really important to kind of humanize the online process and to also help socialize the online process as well. We've probably all felt this sometimes, is that sometimes studying online can feel a bit sort of robotic, a bit dehumanized. We don't always feel there's a kind of a person there. We're not always able to communicate and connect with other people, and being able to create a kind of a space, whether that's a VLE or LMS or virtual learning environment is one thing, or whether it's a virtual reality space where they can meet. Creating place online also helps to reduce what we call transactional distance. And transactional distance is the kind of psychological distance between a teacher and the student. The more we can reduce that, the more students will feel comfortable and willing to express themselves. And place can help with that as well. From a language learning perspective, place is quite important. Firstly, because the idea of role playing can really help improve students' fluency. Being able to put students into a particular role, you're the waiter, you're the customer, you're the ticket inspector, you're the traveler. All of these things, putting them in these situations can really help them to practice the language and develop the language. And as part of that, if we put students into situations where they can practice the language, it will help them to transfer that language to real life. So by being able to practice it in an authentic context will then make it easier for them to use it when they go out into the real world. And there have been some initial research into language learning in VR. Obviously, it's a relatively young technology, but some research has been done into using VR for language learning and what benefits it can offer. Some of the sort of positive features that VR can offer are, as I mentioned, this idea of sort of transfer and contextualization. VR can put students into the situation where the language is used, and that helps them transfer that language to use it in the real world. It can aid with vocabulary recall, and there have been several studies which suggest that, again, by seeing these objects, seeing the language in realistic context, it can help people to remember what they are. It can also help with engagement and motivation, and students have reported being far more motivated when they are using virtual reality to learn English than perhaps in other contexts. And also VR can help to reduce anxiety. And there have been some studies that suggest that communicating via an avatar can really help them to feel more free, less anxious when communicating, and perhaps more willing to talk and make mistakes. From a sort of not negative perspective, but there are certainly research gaps as well. I think one of the key things about VR is that a lot of these studies have positive results, but we have to take into account the novelty factor of virtual reality. Students sort of say, yes, I learned a lot, this was wonderful, and I remember it. But the fact that it's such an unusual technology and it's something they're trying for the first time can often have that positive boost to their knowledge, and it can help them remember it better. However, this may be a short-term thing, and the problem is that there haven't been quite extensive research into the use of VR for language learning. Research over months or years with students using it regularly to have a real sense of whether vocabulary retention or engagement and motivation retain over a longer period. So those are some of the issues with VR. So we were interested to explore this, and I love technology. I love testing out technology. So it's great to try some of this stuff out. And so we ran a pilot course using this software. You can see a picture there from the lesson. And it was a 5-week course with 10 hours, so two 1-hour lessons a week. We had 9 Japanese students spread across 2 classes. The focus was on speaking. We felt that virtual reality worked better for sort of productive activities and getting students to talk. And of the 9 students, 5 agreed to take part in our research. And we conducted surveys during the course and then longer interviews at the end using Zoom to sort of find out in more detail their responses to how they felt about studying in virtual reality. Now, before I talk about the results of that, I thought it might be useful for you to actually see an example of what a lesson in VR looks like, or at least a very small clip of this. And this is a very good example of sort of contextualized learning and role-playing, where students are engaged in a role play in a fast food restaurant with the teacher as the kind of assistant and the students ordering. The sound is not perfect, but hopefully you get an idea of what the lessons actually look like. Let me just unmute it.
What would you like to order?
I'd like a hot dog and a Coke and fries, please.
Hot dog, Coke, and fries. Coming right up. Anything else I can get you? Okay, Yuki, what can I get for you?
I'd like hamburger and fries and coffee, please.
Hamburger, fries, and coffee, certainly. Anything else?
Yes, how much?
That is $9.97, please.
Okay, can I use a credit card?
Of course. We'll accept card or cash. That's fine.
Let me just pause it there a moment. You can see there behind the student was a whiteboard where the teacher had put up some language as well. So although we're creating these authentic contexts, there's a lot of useful pedagogical tools you can actually, and quite traditional tools that you can use during the lesson. So if they're having problems with language, you can pop up things onto a whiteboard, you can put slides onto a screen, if you want to present something in sort of PowerPoint, etc. The next small example is of a student giving a presentation. And again, normally students would hate giving a presentation in English in front of other students in a foreign language. And Japanese students are often quite traditional and quite reticent in speaking in English. So it was very noticeable that they were far more willing to do this. You can see an example here.
About Summer Wars. Do you know Summer Wars? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. This is this anime. No. This movie's genre is anime and human drama. Cast and crew. This anime has a celebrate crew.
Okay. So you can see that it was a student. He didn't prepare very much, but he was willing to kind of stand up. And again, that most people would feel very nervous doing that kind of thing. But I think again in VR they had that feeling of being hidden, of being behind a different character, which made it very different for them and made them far more willing to be quite brave and bold in speaking in front of the other students.
Okay.
So we asked them lots of questions through the surveys, and the interviews at the end of the course. Here are some examples of the questions we asked. And we pulled together all of the comments they made and the statements they said, and we've tried to group those based around certain themes. Certain themes emerged from their comments. So I'd just like to sort of show you some of the things that the students said about the experience of learning in VR. So one theme, obviously the main thing for us was this idea of a sense of place, and they had lots to say about that. You can see there, it gave me unforgettable experiences. We can go many places. In the software, you can transport students to lots of different places. You can take them to, from a shopping center, to a cafe, to an art gallery, to a car showroom, to a city center. And that feeling of being able to move between different places was really appealing to students. And some of them were real places, but there was also quite a nice fantasy element to some of them. There was a sort of a Harry Potter type level where they could go in. It was like a wizard's castle, and they could play with sort of wands and stuff. And again, it was a great context to discuss books and films and things like that. And again, the opportunity, the student said, the opportunity to go to many places and speak English in different situations. Same with the airplane, because there's an airplane that they can go in. They really felt they were there, that feeling of being in a place. And I think obviously this was during COVID, and the fact they couldn't go to a lot of these places in the real world made it far more appealing to them. Lots of comments around communication, how they felt about communicating in VR. Student says they feel free to talk in English. And again, this idea of not really looking at other people's faces and them not seeing your face or vice versa really does make a difference. And again, this idea of we're playing a character, we're playing a role, we're not ourselves here. And this can help really reduce a lot of that anxiety. Similar concepts there. A couple of kind of negatives here, well, not negatives, but some of the sort of challenges in the software. Because you can't really see the person's face, a lot of the facial cues are not there. The visual cues for, have I finished? Often your face will tell someone when you finish talking. So it's sometimes difficult for them to know, well, when can I start speaking? Has this person finished talking? And there was no obvious visual way of seeing that. The other thing is perhaps gestures. You've got a fairly limited range of gestures. You can use controllers to kind of move your hands a little bit, but it's not quite as sophisticated as using your body in real life. So this student talks about some of the problems of not being able to gesture properly. I saw a question there. Was this software? No, this was not software prepared for Japanese students. This is worldwide available software. It's not specific for Japanese students. It can be used for students from anywhere. One of the things the students mentioned was the thumbs up gesture. One of the really nice things they could do in the lessons was with the controllers, they could press a button, it would kind of give a little thumbs up. And they really use that a lot to sort of say a positive comment to their colleagues in the classroom or their classmates. If they said something nice or they did something positive, it was a really unobtrusive way for students to positively communicate with each other. Students talked a little bit about kind of memory and attention as well. Students did feel that it was difficult for us to test this exactly in the course, but one of the students did certainly report that they felt it was better for remembering new words than in a face-to-face classroom. This idea of having a positive experience and a real experience and then remembering the words from that came out from there. The other thing is perhaps that in VR, the level of concentration has to be greater. So, students, the headset kind of cuts them off a little bit. Some people think that's a bad thing, but in some ways it might be a good thing because they don't have the window to look out of. They don't have their mobile phone to glance at. They don't have another browser tab to look at. They really are sort of have to concentrate on what's happening inside the headset. In some cases, those students felt perhaps more distracted being in VR. And one of the students felt that, but because there's a lot of things they can interact with in VR, they can pick up things, they can throw things around, it did actually distract them from the lessons. The software does help us to sort of control that a little bit. We can kind of freeze objects so they can't touch them. But the rich environment can potentially be have a negative effect on them as well. So what do we learn about this? I mean, from our experience of teaching in VR and these students studying in VR, what are the sort of opportunities that it does offer? As I said, I was very positive about my experience of teaching in VR. I really enjoyed the process. It was an unusual experience, but it felt actually more like being a teacher than teaching using something like Zoom or Teams. It felt more like being in a face-to-face context, because I felt us all kind of in the same space and sort of moving in the same space and working in the same space. And it really does help with that kind of contextualized and situated learning. You can see some of the pictures there, coffee shops and doctors' waiting rooms and kitchens. It's so easy to set up activities and role plays by having them actually in that context than trying to do it either in a Zoom room or a face-to-face classroom, where you have to kind of imagine that you're in this situation. Incredible possibilities for confidence and freedom to speak. We all experience this as teachers, seeing our students struggle sometimes or too nervous to communicate in a language. Maybe by having this practice opportunity in VR, this will then build the confidence to then use the language in real life. And like we said, it does help perhaps with the transfer of language and the ability to recall language later. We also found that students work better together in VR. There was a lot more sort of positive peer support, sort of positive communication between them, and a willingness to collaborate as well and to work together. And perhaps not as much as a face-to-face class, but we felt there was a lot more variety and options for improvisation in the VR class. I find when I teach using something like Zoom, my lesson has to be very strictly planned and prepared. I need to know exactly what's happening all the time. But in the VR room, I was more willing to improvise. If something wasn't working, I could say, okay, let's move to a different location and talk there. And it allowed for a bit more improvisation from the teacher. Some interesting questions I can perhaps address. Yeah, classes were limited in size. I mean, this is a limitation of the software. You can only have 8 students in a class. I think that's a sort of a network issue. So that's a limit. It looks a bit like a video game. It does, but it does have a serious language learning function as well. What are some of the challenges of VR? As I mentioned, one of the things that the students brought up was the lack of facial and visual cues, which are often quite an important part of language learning. Being able to look at someone's face and see what they're saying, being able to see the mouth, that can sometimes help with pronunciation as well. But I think perhaps down the line in the future, the quality of the sort of face and the visual cues will get better. There is the issue of the novelty wearing off. VR is a kind of a cool technology at the moment that everyone's kind of interested in, particularly with Facebook and the metaverse and all these things that have been going on. But there may be a point where people get a bit tired of it and the initial interest and novelty of it wears off, and it becomes just like any other tool that are being used. To a certain degree, you're kind of limited by what the software can do. In a real online or in a real face-to-face classroom, there's a lot more chances for the teacher to improvise and create things themselves. There is some of that in VR, but you are also limited by what the software is capable of doing as well. I'll answer some of these questions in a moment. It's such a new technology that perhaps at this stage there's not really a clear pedagogy of VR delivery or VR task design. A few people have mentioned that. At the moment we're still sort of scrabbling around trying to work out what are we doing in VR? How are we teaching languages in VR? Do we teach it in a very traditional way? Do we do it? Do we create a classroom in VR and then teach them in a classroom, or should we be taking advantages of the incredible sort of situational learning we can create by taking them to different locations as well? So I think that's it for my talk today. Those are my lists of references. I know there have been some questions I haven't been able to get to, but I was aware of time. I want to make sure we have a chance to hear, you know, the other talk, and then we can perhaps come back and answer some of those later. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation, David. It seems one of the most authentic ones in the literature, and I think the pedagogy will be around the corner, I guess, soon, hopefully.
Hopefully.
So just quick announcement before we jump to the second session. The certificates for the participation will be sent out to your email addresses. And there will be a bigger Q&A session, so please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A session of the Zoom. So in the chat box, it might be like risky to lose them. Now, I would love to introduce our second speaker tonight, Dr. Tuncer Can. Tuncer Can graduated from Istanbul University as a Fulbright grantee. He studied on languages, linguistics, and literature. Besides working as a supervisor teacher for many language institutions, he has been teaching linguistics, second language acquisition, effective communication skills, lexicology, grammar in context, drama, comparative education at Istanbul University. Last, he has been working on the use of 3D virtual learning environments in training for a language full service teacher. So, Dr. Can, this virtual stage is yours.
Thank you, Özge. Thank you, David. A great introduction to virtual reality, and I had the opportunity to actually enjoy myself reading the comments from our viewers today, and I was really very happy to see that they really enjoyed your presentation about virtual reality, and they got to know what it is about. Now I would like to contribute into this talk here with actually where you left, because you said that it's we need pedagogy, we need more research on this to see how it all works. So what I'm going to do, and I'll stop following the chat now, is share the research that we have done with our students in my MA classes, and I'd like to actually present you with some data from the virtual reality research that we have been doing in the last almost 3 years now, starting from 2018. However, my background is actually in the Second Life, which is actually the three-dimensional virtual world, which preceded the virtual reality, as you said, starting from 2014. Before that, we had other tools to actually present and to make people use the virtual reality. So basically, I'm going to talk about how we use virtual reality, the one that you are talking today, with real students in the classrooms, and then what was the outcome. And as you see, the first study that I'm going to present here is Ruhsar Koçbu study, and this is her name, not my name, because she did the study. I was just the advisor to her MA study that she did with me starting from 2018. So we looked at the effectiveness of virtual reality tools on vocabulary learning and retention. Why vocabulary learning and retention of vocabulary? Because you also suggested that it's very difficult to actually replicate the real human interaction, even in virtual reality. But the easier part to actually work on in these environments is vocabulary, because it's tolerable and it's more operable on it. So I think this is why we mostly do these studies. But later, I presume that it is going to be more pragmatics in the research. There is going to be more communication and more social issues. But now in the ELT, this is what I'm observing too. In the studies, vocabulary is actually gaining more prominence. So what I'm going to do now, first give you the overview of the study itself, what we did, how we did that, what technology we used, and present you with the results of the study itself. So let me just very quickly, talk about the thing that we were actually be doing. But of course, I'm not going to talk about basically what is virtual reality, because you already, David, thank you, talked about this. Virtual reality is this and that. But the only thing that I'm going to touch upon is that the three-dimensional virtual worlds accessible through computer screens for today's technology and for today's classroom practice are easier to do yourself. Talked about that they are getting cheaper. The VR tools are getting cheaper. The goggles, the Oculus, especially Oculus Go, the wireless one, $300 around that. And one of the teachers, when you said the price of it, she said in the chat, "Hey, come on, with the current situation in the Turkish economy and the currency prices, it's going far away from us. So how are we supposed to do that in the classroom?" So this is basically what I'm trying to say. We have computer and the immerse. The example that you gave us was also like you have a computer screen through which you can access the virtual reality. The second example of virtual reality that you mentioned from 2014 is the virtual reality where you don't have your nose anymore in the screen or in front of the screen. And then this is, of course, creating more immersion, because human beings, and this is the GPS of human beings in the world, in the physical world, they know where they are exactly. They know where they are looking at. So the nose is an important GPS device that we have in this world. But when you lose the sense of your nose through the Oculus Go and Oculus Rift, or the others, HTC Vive and stuff, then you are losing the sense of immersion, and then you're immersed more naturally. But of course, it creates other problems. I will talk about them in a minute. So the only thing that I wanted to put into table today was that there is another virtual reality type that you can access with today's technology, which is cheaper because most of the classes have computers. If not, most of the classes have smart boards. If not, most of the students have computers at their homes and this and that. So, and internet connection as well. So these are the questions that we asked to ourselves before we went into the study. Because like I said, my MA student, Rusar, and myself, we said, hey, let's see how it all works. How it all works, that this Oculus Rift or Oculus Go, or like yourselves, you put that the phone accessible or the virtual reality that you can access through your phone with very cheap Google Cardboard, only 10 lira in Turkey. This is very cheap. Come on, only almost $1, less than $1. You can buy one, so you can access. And if you really want to use it in your classroom, you actually can do that. So anyway, these are the questions that we asked. There is a new technology. Let's use it in the classroom. Let's use it with the students. Let's do it cheap. Why? Because we want people to access the virtual reality, and we want them to actually use, our students, this technology for vocabulary retention. So the questions are, what are the effects of VR tools on vocabulary learning? Of course. Is there a difference between the groups, the control and experimental group, and the scores that they're doing before and after the treatment? Of course. What are the effects of VR tools on vocabulary retention, which means we did another exam in the end of the process, after the initial pre-test and the post-test, and then we did another one a couple of weeks later to see what happens with the students, how much they retain the vocabulary from the treatment, with the VR, and then the students' attitudes. I think this is the easiest, and the answer to this, you actually gave it. the students are very happy with this. The students really like to work with cool technologies. And I also saw in the chat that the teachers also want to be cool and they want to use the cool technologies. So this is basically researched a lot and I'm observing a lot of positive stuff about this. But anybody who works with instructional technologies or in this field knows that changing one variable in the classroom creates motivation anyway. So is virtual reality different thing, or is virtual reality, like you put that, just another tool, or is it going to become just another tool like any other stuff? Let's remember when we were talking about CALL, yeah, computer assisted language learning. Wow, how cool was that? Blah blah blah. But then it all went away, and today we need more than that, because it's not novel anymore, and it's going away. You know, it's wearing off, like you put that. So anyway, so these were the questions that we asked. So the significance of the study. This is basically what we thought and why we did this. I'm not going to read all of that, but just give you the idea of why we did that. Yes, this is a new technology. Do we really know how it works? And how about the pedagogy? Öztürk was asking about this. She was saying that it's just around the corner. I have doubts about that, but anyway, this is just a discussion, an ongoing discussion. And of course, the assumptions that we had were, most of the students will feel good about it. Of course, the proficiency between two groups will be the same, blah, blah, blah. All these preparing or preparatory ideas before the treatment itself. And then the limitations, as you see, we did only in 9 weeks, like yourselves. We actually had, and if you want to read more about this, about the whole research and everything, please go ahead in the Turkish thesis search engine of the Higher Education Council. You can find the Ruhsar Koç School VR, and then you can find the whole thing in English. Also, you can just read the whole treatment. So we ended up with 54 participants into 2 different classes. In the first class, we used VR, Google Cardboard, and then we used the phones of the students just to prove that they can actually access to that environment. We designed the lessons based on vocabulary and I'm going to show you some of the apps that we used in the treatment. And then, as you see, experimental and the control group made up of these people here. We ended up using this in adult classes, not kids. So this is another limitation that we have here. Only adults, and adults, majority of them were actually, and perhaps, I don't know, 50 plus. Okay, so these were 50 plus people who were trying to learn English later in their life. Of course, we had a couple of 20, 30, 40-year-old people, but majority was 50 plus. Okay, so here is some of the stuff that I'm not going to read all of that for you, but just give you the virtual reality, blah, blah, blah. This is not the topic now. I'm just going to give you some of the actual apps that we used here in this study. And, the project sounds are developed before the Meta, developed by the Second Life people. Of course, they have to put more work into that, still not in there, but of course they're working on it. So anyway, lots of other technologies, as you're seeing that we have immersive, non-immersive technologies for VR, but I really need to show exactly what we have been using here, and you perfectly put forward why we need to use VR and this and that, so I'm not going to dwell on that. The limitations, you also talked about this, and also why we need to use the role plays and this and that. So let me just, vocabulary, again, I'm not talking about vocabulary because, we are all teachers, we know why we need to teach vocabulary, blah, 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 blah. And then this was the actual study that we did with the students. And the data analysis and everything, of course, how we did all that. And these were some of the apps that we use with the students. As you see, this is Apartment VR, where you can actually walk through the apartment and then talk about the verbalize the prepositions and also the objects and also zillions of other things in this environment here. And also we use the grocery VR where you have to do shopping. There are tasks. You have to understand the task. You have to go and find that the product, put it into your own cart and this and that. So you see, these are quite enjoyable, actually quite enjoyable activities with all these goggles, the Google Cardboard, basically. Of course, the VR roller where you're touring the forest, seeing animals and this and that as well. Also, yeah, another example from this. So these were basically some of the things that we used. So let's with the students. So let's now come to the basics and what happens. All right. So in the end of all that 9 weeks and the results of the study itself. So if you look at table 4.1, you don't have to check all of that, but only 2 things, which is in the pre-test, we found out that the both groups were close to each other, 53 to 54. So they started almost in the same place. So where did they end up? Yeah, I'm not going to take you all through that boring stuff, but let me just show you the end result of the whole study, okay? And then comment on that. If using VR, and answer the first question. If using VR is actually making a difference in the learning of a foreign language or learning of not a foreign language, excuse me, but vocabulary, and also how does that help with the retention? So as you see, in the pre-test, both groups start in the same place, almost, yeah, and then both groups actually have increase, which is perfect, right? Which tells us yes, virtual reality actually works. Even the smallest apps that you can access through your phone and the Google Cardboard, of course, you don't have to have very expensive headsets and this and that, can work in the context of vocabulary training. But how about retention? As you see, both groups are falling after some time. A couple of weeks later, when we have the post-test, both groups are falling in the same. But something very interesting. And when this result came in, Rukhsar and I had this talk where she came in panic and said, "Hoca, you know what?" And I say, yes, what is it? Because she has all these SPSS statistics, this, and she has this in the end. And she says, but you know what? The control group did better. And they had less retention problems. And I said, wow, this is perfect, because this is the aim of the research anyway, to prove if something goes well or something goes not that well. Okay, so don't worry. I mean, we don't have to all find positive results if it is not positive, right? Of course, in her study, remember, we work with people who are 50 plus. People who have difficulty in adopting mobile phones, people who have difficulty adopting new technologies like Google Cardboard, and of course they were not feeling very comfortable with all that stuff put onto their head and trying to do some tasks and activities. Although some thought that it is really, and of course we had the same results as David had. David's students, yeah, it's enjoyable, it is this, that. But we also had that this is also creating anxiety, because I don't want to put that Google Cardboard onto my face when I'm in the English lesson. I want other things. What do they want? 50 plus people, more traditional. Let's remember, they want more human interaction to acquire or to learn a language, versus the young people who are bearing better the technology and of course content and human interaction rather than human to human interaction. So anyway, there is a lot to talk. There is a lot to research still, I guess, before we can say, oh yeah, it works. The answer, a short answer to VR technology, if it works in vocabulary learning, yes. Does that work in retention? Yes, of course, we see that it works. But of course, there are some question marks about who these people are, old or young, or what type of learning preferences they have. more traditional or more innovative people. So this is all again, it all comes down to this ancient wisdom that says it all depends. Okay, so this is my finding. This is what I learned from my student herself. Then I thought to myself, perhaps it was the language, perhaps it was the student's age, the problem. Why we found out this result there? Why they learned definitely, but then they forgot. But also the control group did better. And I said, perhaps it was the language. English is difficult to learn. Our people are not accustomed to learn it, all Turkish people, of course. And I said to myself, let's change the language, one variable, do the same treatment, okay, the same apps, but this time, because in the apps you have the visuals, you don't have the language itself necessarily, but you have the apps themselves. And then we did the same study with Turkish learners, people who are learning Turkish as a foreign language. Of course, most of these kids who were learning Turkish were university students, all young people who we expect to embrace technology, to access technology and everything else. The result here is almost identical to our previous study with Ruhsar. So Zafer Tarhan, another student of mine, who was actually doing his MA with VR tools on vocabulary retention, but with the Turkish language this time. So as you see, people learning Turkish as a foreign language, there was an increase in vocabulary, definitely in the post-test. But then, of course, there was also not a statistically significant difference between their test results that we did afterwards. And also in the retention, there was also no significant difference like the identical study that we did previously with Ruhsar. And as you see, when we asked about the motivation and this and that, everything else, they were like, yeah, it is entertaining, it is remarkable, it is motivational. This is all the answers that they gave us. So as you see, this is all very nice. But when we look at the functional part of the study, question marks. When you look at the motivation and more psychological parts, yes, of course. But like I said, anybody who works with instructional technologies knows that a change in a variable in the classroom with a new technology increases the motivation anyway, and we know that already. So lots of other results, but this is not basically my topic anymore, right? So this is not the study. So we thought to ourselves, perhaps it is the environment that is creating the problem here. That's why we are not finding the real answer to that question if VR works in language teaching. So what can we do? Okay, let me just change my study, okay, and then do what? Do something different. So what is that something different? Let me just share the next study we did with another student of mine from in this business. Okay, so here Ceren worked with me on developing a virtual reality application for travel English in foreign language teaching. So we said to ourselves, perhaps we understand it's not the language, because you teach Turkish, you teach English, you have the same results. Perhaps it's the applications that are the problem, okay? Because we have these applications that are accessible through the phone. Let's develop our own application that is accessible only through Oculus Go, okay? Because it has to be wireless as well. We want to do a real thing, and this is basically where we came to in the end of this MA study. Okay, so what is happening? Yeah, we prepared our environment as a virtual reality to work with Oculus Go. We used Unity 3D to actually create the environment, and the scripted language was C++, as you see. We used also the Unity 3D's asset store to get some of the materials. We applied for a grant a small grant at the university, and we were given because the university also thinks it's cool to research the virtual reality because everybody's talking about this. By the way, the study goes on in 2019. Okay, after I did the studies with my own initial studies with my Turkish and English study on VR, then we went into building our own environment and our own stuff so that we actually provide a real environment, okay, like David's example there. Okay, so these were the things that we used and blah, 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 blah. And then what happens? This was the game design that we created, the environment in the game design. You start the game, you get into the airport. In the airport, you meet the security. There is a certain exchange that you have to talk about your belts. Also in the, all these regular things. And then we just created these dialogues between them. So initially, it was not like the David study, the immerse study, but it was basically talking to an avatar. And then in the avatar business, the avatar can answer you back, like in the Mondly VR, David showed us an example, where you can talk to an actual avatar, but the avatar is, automatic avatar who can answer, who can track your voice and who can actually answer you, not like the Mondly 1-0 traditional, selection of what is the right answer, A or B, what do you say, A or B. We are not talking about this. We are talking about the real business here to be able to control the environment with your own voice. And this is what is teaching, what is actually helping the acquisition of any language in the mother tongue as well. So basically, I think the affordances of virtual reality, among the affordances of virtual reality is this: the ease of controlling the environment with your own voice, not only the controllers that Oculus Go gives you, but also your voice. So this was the thing that we put in there, of course, and then some basic and real dialogues that you can do with this avatar, with those avatars, that you can meet security guards, and then somebody who cleans up, the janitors, and then the person who checks in your passport, and this, and the police, and this and that. So all of that stuff was actually created here in this environment. So I'm just going to show you what came out in the end. Yes, we designed all these environments. Then we had some real students to go into this environment, and then with the Oculus Go, and to check if everything is okay, if they can move around, if they can do stuff. And as you see, there are a lot of other things that we created. The food court there, the lost and found place, all these stuff that you can actually find in the real airport, and all of these avatars can actually answer you back when you talk to them. Yeah. Okay. So in the end, I'm just not going to talk about all that, but if you're really into reading this, go ahead, Ceren Çağlar VR, and then you can find it from the thesis, actually research from the Turkish Higher Education Council website. All of these things that we created there, and this is just one dialogue that I'm showing you here. Welcome to Istanbul, blah, 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 stuff. And so the research design. So what we looked at specifically was, of course, what the students did, and we used the eye tracking device to see how it all works, how the students are actually interacting with those content, with the content that we created, with the real characters there, the avatars. And then in the end, after all that study that we did with those students, we tracked what they're doing. In the end, of course, we had better visuals here, as you see, because we now know what type of things they're looking at and looking for, also the students. Yeah. So this is basically where we came out with the adjustments of the environments and this and that. So on the left, you're seeing the previous version, and then on the right, the adjustments. So now, this was the whole thesis that we did. Okay, we created the environments. You can talk to the avatars, no problem. But this is just the initial study, the initial phase of the study. Now, Ceren, after completing her study in 2020, in 2021 was accepted for the PhD. Now we are working on another thing, okay, which is now we have the environment itself. We have, of course, it's travel English, and of course we have what? We have the airport scenario only, okay? And now what we are doing is actually working with the avatars, and the avatars now will be able to assess your level A1, A2, B1, okay? We are not doing more than B1 because here we are trying to teach a foreign language, English in this context right now. So the avatar is going to the security, for example, when you say, hey, hello, how are you, what are you doing, blah blah blah, are going to assess what type of level you are, and based on your level, the scenario is going to be varied. Okay, so this is what we are going to work on right now, to vary the scenarios rather than letting them in the David's study. What we had was they had to basically do the role plays with other people, with real people, which is perfect, great, and this is one of the affordances of virtual reality. But now we want to do it with avatars, the automatic avatars, yeah, who can track your from your voice your level, and then can give you activities which are varied. They, of course, not only doing the same activity and old role play or dialogue training in audiolingual method, right? So we will try to give you the twist where you can actually do more activities with these avatars, and then they can give you variations in the dialogues, and they are going to give you more tasks based on your level. So if you're A1, they will keep it simple. If you're A2, they will give you other tasks in between, okay? Not only your belt, but you have to do something else as well, and they have to tell you that, and you have to understand and continue with this. So this is basically what we have been working on in the last 2-3 I guess 3 years, more than 3 years now. So I think this is marking the end of my talk today. So I'd like to thank you everyone for attending today, and yeah, I'm also ready for the question and answer session now. So thank you, Özge.
Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Tuncer Hocam.
Yeah.
Yes, it was very interesting. Yes, and to see your students and your work in collaborative way. Yes, great. And now I would like to move to the Q&A session and start with the questions in the Q&A part. And maybe we can start with David first. So I would like to ask to David. So one question, was that software prepared by you specifically for Japanese students, or is it a ready-made program that can be used in different contexts as well?
No, it's got nothing to do with me at all. It's a commercial company called Immerse who created this software to allow teachers to interact with students in virtual reality in classes. I think it's used in various countries, in various places, and we were just given the opportunity to kind of pilot it for free to enable us to do some research. I'm very grateful for them to do. I think Nergis, who works for Immerse here, actually, she's just put a link into the chat for that. So yeah, hi Nergis. So yeah, it's worth looking at. Like I said, I've got no involvement with the company, but I felt that their software was the most user-friendly available to be able to engage with language learners.
And combining the other question, did you get any quantitative data, or was it only qualitative study?
It was really qualitative. Obviously, we had quite a small number of participants on the course. We were very reliant on, this has been one of the challenges, is that we're reliant on students already owning the headsets for them to be able to participate in the course. And we really don't know how many students out there have these headsets and want to learn English. And so we sort of sent out a request to some of our Japanese university contacts, and some of the students got back to us and said they would like to participate. So it's quite a small number, and so it wasn't really possible to get sort of quantitative data really from that would be meaningful. So we were relying more heavily on the sort of qualitative data, particularly in asking them questions and finding out what their own feelings and experiences were of learning in VR. So I think things like vocabulary recall, it was very difficult to test that kind of thing. But I think things like, their feelings of freedom to speak, their reduction in anxiety, I think these were possible to get from them based on the qualitative data we were able to get from them.
Okay, thank you very much. And I will get back to you as well. And jumping to the second,
Sure.
Second one, we have one question for Tuncer Hocam. Considering that both groups were equal, why do you think the control group performed better in post-test and follow-up test averages?
Well, this is not for thinking. This is given. The age of the participants was actually 50 plus, and these people are preferring to learn traditionally. And when you give them what they prefer to do because this is creating less anxiety, then of course they are more successful than people who feel anxiety because of the technology itself. So actually technology sometimes can prevent them from learning. So this is basically why I think they did better, and of course they did better in retention. So this is very easy mathematics. It's not difficult.
Thank you very much. So one general question to both of you. What would you say about VR assessment and its advantages, disadvantages over face-to-face one? Do you have any idea?
I'm not sure I have much to say about assessment at this point. It's quite, I'm not sure VR is necessary. It could be a place that, for example, speaking assessment could be carried out reasonably effectively. But I think that's a whole area that needs exploring, really.
Yeah, I would agree with David here, because we still can't use it for instruction, so let alone assessment. So I think this is a very early question yet. For the assessment to happen, you need to have instruction and a good experience for learning. And once you do it, then you can have assessment. So and the assessment tasks here that you can create are actually limitless, because like in the David's work, you could write in the chat, and then you could also have this in the background, in your screen. So it's limitless, basically. Whatever we are doing face to face, you can actually do in this environment. This is basically given. But the point here is what the teachers are using it for. And of course, if the learners are actually have access to that environment. So I think this question should come later, not today, perhaps in a couple of years of time.
I think one potential use, I think Nargis mentions this in the chat, is exam preparation potentially. We often ask students to take part in speaking exams where they have to sit in front of an examiner, or they work in a pair and sit in front of an examiner. And again, maybe VR would be a good place for students to practice that in a low threat environment before they go into the actual exam itself. So if students were preparing for the IELTS speaking exam or the first certificate or something like that, it might function as a way to practice that comfortably.
And David, you also mentioned about affective filter.
Yeah.
The anonymity that you can actually create through these avatars and the avatar faces is actually helping a lot with speaking, the development of the speaking skill. And this is put a lot in the literature. That anonymity creates lowering anxiety, creates better speaking. So we don't have to even discuss that today, because it's given. And this technology actually provides a lot of potential for that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And like the engaging large number of participants for your study, like was it difficult, or I mean, for the potential studies, the number, what can you say about the number of participants in your studies? And the question was, sorry, that was it difficult to engage a larger number of participants?
In my study, it was just availability of students with the required technology, really, and obviously that's something that's come up frequently, and it is an ongoing challenge. Is pricing and availability and access and things like that, and so we have to be realistic that I was teaching. I'm privileged to be able to work in a university in the UK, and the students were Japanese students who I think income was reasonably good, and so they had access to the technology. I appreciate that's not possible in other places, and so other options and other possibilities have to be explored. And I think what Tuncer's been doing with Google Cardboard and things like that, there are a range of possibilities which can be both sort of high cost and expensive, but also quite low cost but still effective.
And do you want to add anything, Tuncer, or not?
Well,
Yeah.
in our case, it was basically a school that we went, and then we adult school actually teaching English that we wanted to attract to those studies. So it was. And of course, we were looking for people with smartphones, unlike David's, heavy and also expensive headset. So it was easier for us, I guess. That's why we had like 50 plus people working with us in this. So it was okay.
Okay. So yeah, wrapping up some questions together. As a last one, we got questions like: is it tiring? Is it addictive? So some stuff like this. Yeah, these would be the latest, the last comments, and then I think we will just need to say goodbye soon. Yes.
So what was the question again? Sorry.
Is it tiring or is it addictive? This including VR.
I think obviously there are issues around, as Tuncer mentioned, wearing something on your head, and they can be quite heavy, some of them, and so it can be quite tiring. It can be tiring on the eyes. It can be tiring on the head itself, having to wear these. So I think a bit like during lockdown and COVID, we were very aware of how long students could spend in front of a screen. I think with VR, we have to be very careful about how long students can spend inside a VR headset, and what potential dangers and damage that might do to their eyes. And there obviously have been studies done as to the sort of longer term effects of students spending too long in front of a VR headset.
Yeah, I agree with David, and let me just give you a small idea of or a news actually from 1930s. Okay, so one of the journalists reports on the ideas of some locals from somewhere in the United States, and he says, hey, you know what, these young people these days are putting their heads into their radios and then not talking to anyone. So look at this, 1930s radios, okay? So I'm seeing the same thing today. These days, we are not anymore putting our heads into the radio and just listen to it and not communicating with other people, but it's of course other things. The screens are all around, the phones are all around, so we are just putting our heads into those, and these days, of course, the Oculus Go, for example. So we just put our heads into those and just not communicating with people. So this is the way I see the adoption of new technologies. It has always been the same. Like for example, a book is a new technology anyway at the time. It is an old technology today, and then we are talking about new ways of introducing the content or the knowledge to people. So this is just another way actually to simplify it, I think. To simplify it is just another way of letting people access information. Plus, it is working better. Why? Because you don't only have to use your eyes, but also your ears, and then through your touch there, you're also kinesthetic side of your language acquisition. So this is basically why it is okay. And for addiction, we are addicted to anything anyway. So I'm not guessing that it is going to be more addictive than the television itself or the radio in 1930s. So you see, it's basically the same thing, I guess.
Yes, so thank you very much. I think the participants can contact you like via email if they have more questions, because I think the time is just, we don't have enough time to cover all of them. And thank you very much for your great presentations. And just one last thing for our participants, the certificates will be sent out to your email addresses in a week after the webinar. And for the latest updates, you can follow us on our social media accounts and you can check our website. So thank you very much on behalf of our team. Yes, it was a great pleasure to have both of you. Thank you very much and hope to see you, the participants, in our fourth webinar. So have a lovely evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good luck, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.